Hey Michigan fans, welcome to the Wolverine247 weekend wrap-up. We have not been canceled yet. In fact, they liked what I did or disliked what I did so much that they gave me a camera and they told me to go outside, so I came here. As you may recall, episode 1 and 2 were filmed in my room from my laptop, so this is going to look a little different. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your taste, there's not going to be a different host. I'm still Zach Shaw. I cover the team for Michigan.247sports.com. You can read all of our content there. But we also make this video to try to speed things up, give you something fresh to take away from the weekend. Same host, also going to be the same format. We're going to go 6 numbers to know, top 5 GIFs, 4 Hail Mail questions, 3 sizzling hot takes, 2 MVPs, and 1 bold prediction for next week. First, your 6 numbers to know. 159, the number of points Michigan has scored in its first 3 games of the season. That has only happened once in all of Michigan football history, the only other time being in 1976, when the Wolverines scored 161 points in their first 3 games. 4, number of defensive and special teams touchdowns Michigan has scored this season. That is tied for first in the nation with, of course, Ohio State. 1954, the only other time in program history that Michigan scored 2 touchdowns on a punt. They got 1 from a block and 1 from a return. We'll get to those later on in our show. In 1954, it occurred on November 13th against Michigan State. 10.53, Michigan's opponent's conversion rate on 3rd down opportunities. That is good for 2nd best in the nation. Colorado went 1 for 13 on Saturday. 9.5, tackles for loss that Jabril Peppers has accumulated this season. He had 3.5 on Saturday and now leads the nation in the category. There's a plane overhead. Isn't it fun? Shooting outside. 14, the number of points Michigan trailed by in the first quarter, and also the number of times they have come back from a deficit of that size in their entire program history. Now it's time for our top 5 GIFs of the weekend. Very important timing toward the end of the first half. In the final minute of the half, Michigan still trailing, but thanks to Amara Darbo's quick feet and 2 broken tackles, he's able to go in for the score. Really nice look by Darbo in a game where the wide receivers weren't able to accomplish much. He did get that touchdown, and it gave Michigan a halftime lead that it so desperately needed. This one isn't necessarily quite as much of a highlight. De'Veon Smith is known for breaking tackles. Didn't have to do it here thanks to the blocks. We'll look at it again, but there's 4 blocks, crucial blocks laid down. Khalid Hill actually had 2 on his own. As the pitch goes, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. That 5th block, De'Veon Smith gets his first touchdown of the entire season. Jabril Peppers has been close so many times, such an elusive returner. He takes that line drive one at his own 46, runs through, nearly gets tackled, keeps going. He started cramping up at the 5, makes it into the end zone, the promised land. He said later he was tired of being an almost guy. With that touchdown, he no longer is. And with Michigan trailing, it was Michael Jose who came in, got the punt, it bounces around for a while, and Grant Perry comes in. His 2nd career touchdown came at a very important time for the Wolverines. Let's run it back one more time. Colorado has 3 blockers. Michigan sends 4. Jose gets in there, blocks it, and bounces around. Looks like 4 or 5 players touch it before Grant Perry scoops it in for a score. Jabril Peppers, we're obviously talking about him a lot in this video, and here he comes. He sneaks in, goes untouched, and takes down Steven Montez, the backup quarterback. What's phenomenal to me about that is, and Wilton Speight talked about this in practice, about how Jabril Peppers would sometimes be so fast and so quick that he wouldn't even be seen. You see the offensive lineman line up. Jabril Peppers sneaks through completely untouched for the 11-yard sack. Our first question comes from C-Max Run, who asks, with reports of O'Korn doing well in practice still and Speight struggling against Colorado, would you bet we see a switch at QB this year, outside of injuries? And that's a good question. It's always something that comes up after a quarterback does struggle and maybe the team struggles a little bit. I will, however, say that watching the game again, watching some of the tape, and hearing the comments from Jim Harbaugh on Saturday, I don't think that Wilton Speight struggled as much as fans think he did. Colorado has a lot of veteran cornerbacks, just like Michigan does, and they're very experienced, including some that have gotten all Pac-12 honors, and they just did a really nice job guarding Amara Darbo and J.U. Chesson. It was pretty evident, especially in the first half. I think they got a little gassed in the second half once Colorado's offense stopped moving, but in that first half, those receivers were being guarded very well. And so it's hard to complete passes when you drop back and there's nobody open. So there's that. I also don't think Speight actually had that bad of a day. If going 16 for 30 for 229 yards and a touchdown is Speight on a bad day, I think Michigan fans are going to be just fine with their quarterback play this season. But it's also worth noting that Spate is in his third start. I don't think Harbaugh plans to play O'Korn. Those of us at Wolverine247 have heard is that Spate wasn't that close to O'Korn. It was a little bit wider margin than the media reports had previously suggested. However, I do think if O'Korn continues to play well, Harbaugh won't be afraid to put him in there. But I think he's going to stick with Spate as long as Spate does as well as Spate has been doing. Our next question comes from Michael Harden II, who asks, will JD play next week? The secondary is less than stellar without him. Michael, the secondary is fine. Colorado has a very strong passing attack. That's what they do. Similar to UCF choosing to run the ball down Michigan's throat and only getting 56 yards passing against the Wolverines, Colorado chose to pass it. They have a senior quarterback. They have very veteran wide receiver core. I mean, you're talking about a team that could very well throw for over 4,000 yards this year. So for Sefa Lufau to go 16 for 25 for 246 yards and 3 scores, yeah, it's not ideal. But most of those came from inside post routes, from the slot position, tight end work, guys up the middle. That's not where Jordan Lewis is going to play, and that's not where he's missed. I do, however, think that he is missed in general. So far, we've heard mostly encouraging things. For those of you at home, muscle strains normally take about 3 to 4 weeks to recover. I think when you have the rehabilitation resources that Michigan has, I think you can count on that being closer to 3, maybe even 2, if it's not that bad of a muscle strain and you're an exceptional athlete like Jordan Lewis is. So I would expect him to play against Penn State. Personally, I'm not the doctor. They don't give us the medical reports, but I do expect him to play. He was running last week. It sounded like, based on Michigan cornerback coach Mike Zordich said, he was also starting to work his way back into drills, and he's someone that doesn't need to be eased in so much as he just needs to get that green light, and he'll go. I expect him to play, but it's not a promise. Our next question comes from JB734, who asks, didn't get to watch the game due to work, excluding Jabril because he's a freak. Who is the best player on offense, defense, and special teams this week? And JB, that's a good question, because outside of Jabril Peppers, it was a rather humbling game for most of Michigan. The receivers had down games. Wilton Spate, even though I just defended him, he had a bit of a down game. The cornerbacks, just defended them as well. They were down. Safeties looked very sloppy. DeMonte Thomas and Delano Hill had probably one of their worst games I've seen them have since Jim Harbaugh took over. The linebackers were biting on play action a lot in the first quarter. Defensive front looked pretty good, and that's where I think our defensive MVP is. The non-Jabril defensive MVP has to go to his former high school teammate, Sean Gary. Gary had another really good game coming off the bench, 1.5 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hurries. Very good game for him. Just his third game in college. His second strong game in a row. It seemed like he was involved in every single rush. He was getting double covered at times, making plays happen both for himself and others. That's what makes him the non-Jabril Peppers defensive MVP. In special teams, once again, Jabril Peppers probably the main guy, but I'd give it to Michael Jotes. Jotes was the one who went in there and got that first touchdown block. The second punt that was blocked, as we know, was actually punted right into Colorado's max protect coverage. They punted it into themselves, but Jotes got that first one. He broke through first, got the block that not only led to a touchdown, but ruined Colorado's punting the rest of the day. They were trying rugby style, they were trying pro style, line drives, high kickers, everything they could to try to just get the ball away from the line of scrimmage. Credit to Big Mike there. Jim Harbaugh has commended him as the smartest player on the team, and this week he gets to be the non-Jabril Peppers special teams MVP. So many honors there. On offense, it was probably Jake Butt. As I mentioned, Amar Darboh and J.U. Chesson really had a tough time getting open, but Jake Butt was able to. He's obviously a mismatch for just about anybody that's guarding a tight end in the country, but credit to him finding his way to 7 receptions for 87 yards. Didn't get a touchdown, but did his job, made sure that he was open, and got Wilton Spate into a bit of a rhythm starting in the second quarter. Our final question comes from Ryan Peterman 27, who asks, I seen Kemp in there at the end of the game. Guessing we'll be seeing more of him after burning that red shirt. And as we've said, in both past videos and past articles, just because a player goes in and loses his red shirt doesn't mean that he's going to start playing all the time. Harbaugh, for him, a lot of it is getting those players an experience. It's tough. It's tough to sit on the bench a whole year and get better. It's easier if you have a little bit of game experience, and I know you lose that 5th year, but the players come to play, and as long as they're ready, Jim Harbaugh is going to put them in. You can disagree or agree with that. Nonetheless, defensive end Carlo Kemp got his way into the game. He was the one new player the one new face. Ryan, just to let you know that that game was a little special for him. He's from Boulder, Colorado. He's a Colorado guy. He's very heavily considering going to Colorado. So this was a personal game. You know, he's got friends and family watching from home. A lot of them made it to the stadium. So why not put him in? You know, if he's going to be a factor at any point during this season, if he's even close, if that gap's even somewhat narrowed, you might as well put him in. Colorado doesn't come to Ann Arbor every day. In fact, they're probably not going to come back for quite some time. So you might as well put him in. I think it was the right move. As what we'll see from him later on in this season, I think a lot of that comes down to who's healthy and who's injured. If guys keep getting banged up, he may see a lot of snaps, but even if he doesn't, I know it's a special experience for him to get in that game. It was a lot more personal to him than any other player on the field. Hey, we're back outside. Now it's time for the 3 sizzling hot takes from the weekend. These takes are so fire that I actually need sunglasses to get through them. Of course, as we talked about last week, hot takes, not necessarily the most accurate, but we're getting them while they're hot, we're quick to the punch, and we are certainly bold with our statement. Number 1, Grill Peppers, book your flight to New York City. I can't say you'll win the Heisman yet, but you will definitely be in contention. We've talked about him a couple times on the show already. 3.5 tackles for loss, 206 all-purpose yards, his first return touchdown, the 2 biggest hits of the game. The list goes on and on and on. He was lights out, he was the best player on the field, and maybe even the best player on any field in the country on Saturday. I think that he's starting to hit his stride in his new position. These sorts of games are only going to become the norm, and I think by the end of the season, he'll be deemed one of the best players in the country and will be invited to New York City for the Heisman ceremonies. As Jim Harbaugh put it on Saturday, Michigan does not win that game without Jabril Peppers. That is generally a trait you are looking for when you're picking Heisman candidates. Number 2, Rashawn Gary should be a starter. As I said earlier in the video, Rashawn Gary was the 2nd best defensive player behind Jabril Peppers, and he didn't even start. He came off the bench in his 3rd collegiate game on Saturday, still was able to rack up 2 quarterback hurries, 4 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. He's very good. He's unstoppable. They had to double team him at times. He was constantly creating noise on that defensive line. He needs to be in the game more, and I think one way you can do that is by putting him in the starting lineup. 3rd hot take. This one's tough to do after a strong performance in the first 2 games, but the wide receivers need to step it up. Yes, they were facing potential All-American cornerbacks and All Pac-12 cornerbacks, guys who will be in the NFL next season. They're seniors right now. That's a tough group to face. But they are also senior players who expect to be in the NFL, who certainly could contend for all Big Ten honors at wideout. Amar Darboh and J.U. Chesson need to find a way to get open better and sooner. They were able to in the second half when the cornerbacks were tired out, but they need to be able to get a hot start because Big Ten cornerbacks don't get tired as easily as Colorado ones do. They need to find ways to get open to adjust, whether it's fixing their routes, running the routes crisper, or something else. They need to find a way to get open, otherwise it's going to be a very, very sluggish offense coming out of the gate in every game this season. Well, the sunglasses are off and the hot takes are over. Now we move toward our 2 MVPs. First MVP, Jabril Peppers. We've talked about him plenty. I'll say this. He's just the best player Michigan has. It might be one of the best players any team has in the country. Our second MVP goes to Sefo Liufau, who completed 16 to 25 passes for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns against Michigan. Remember, even without Jordan Lewis, Michigan is still one of the best pass defenses in the country. Make no mistake, he is not the sole person to make that better. But Sefo Liufau made that group look silly on Saturday. He was all over the place. He was throwing balls 70 yards, 50 yards, 5 yards. Everything was clicking for him. Did a nice job in the pocket, in the face of the defensive line. In that first quarter, Sefo Liufau looked as good as any quarterback has against Michigan at any time in the Jim Harbaugh era. That's why he's our second MVP of the weekend. And we've got one more segment. That's going to be my one bold prediction for next week, and here it is. In this stadium behind me, Penn State will get shut out by the Michigan Wolverine. Last week I told all of our beloved readers and viewers that Colorado would keep it close, that they would go under the spread, and that they would scare Michigan a little bit. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happened. So listen to me when I say this. Penn State is going to get shut out next weekend. Jim Harbaugh has made it clear that he does not care for Penn State. Michigan's fans certainly do not care for Penn State. I think Penn State's a younger, weaker offense, and if Michigan gets Jordan Lewis and Taco Charlton and maybe even Brian Monet back, it's going to be pretty unstoppable, and they're going to be hungry for a shutout. I think they get it. I think the Nittany Lions go home without a single point and certainly without a single victory. Well, that's going to do it for the Wolverine247 weekend wrap-up. Of course, you can always follow our content every day, 24 hours of the day, 7 days of the week. It's in our name on michigan.247sports.com. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope you have a good week ahead. Thanks for watching.